Hey, welcome and welcome back for those of you returning. Excited to have everyone here. This is going to be an awesome conversation. So for those of you that know me, I'm Kathy Liska, MCC, and I'm with the Center for Coaching Certification and Coach 123.
Hi, I'm Pandora Ray. Some of you know me, some may not, and I'm also with the Center for Coaching Certification and Coach 123, and so looking forward to this conversation too. Rich, to you, I think.
Yes, good morning. I'm Rich Jasper, and I am with Perceptual Intelligence, and I am also delighted to be here with Kathy and Pam.
And my name is Kevin Holtzman, also a new face, I'm sure, and I'm a senior sales executive for the organization Perceptual Intelligence, and looking forward to today's conversation.
And I'm Eric Van Alstyne, the founder of Perceptual Intelligence and author of the books in the Perceptual Intelligence series. It sure is great to be here.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with the obvious question. What is perceptual intelligence?
You know, when we were talking before, Kathy, you had an answer that I thought was beautiful, and I'd love to hear yours. If you wouldn't mind, you tell me a little bit about yours, and I'll color comment.
Here I
It's so
am
good.
trying to give you the lead, Eric. Okay, so
It's super good, and I'll add to it, but it's super good.
So the way I explain it is a lot of the people that I work with are very familiar with emotional intelligence. And so I'll say, okay, so the idea of emotional intelligence is to identify and manage emotions, which begs this question, where do these emotions come from? And where they come from is perceptions. So the idea of perceptual intelligence is to go even deeper behind emotional intelligence, identify the perceptions that are creating these emotions. The added element to that part of the conversation, we often talk in the coaching world about the difference between intention and impact. What somebody intends and what the actual impact is may or may not be the same thing. Well, that's the case with perceptions too. They may or may not be accurate. They may or may not be based on what somebody intended, etc. So the ability to identify those perceptions and think about where they're coming from and what they're based on and what the different possibilities are is phenomenal. All right, so now let me give it back to you, Eric.
That was a great answer, and I love the connection with emotional intelligence because I think so many of us connect with that. We understand what emotional intelligence is and how important it is. You know, you can be very smart. We deal with a lot of folks that are very smart. A surgeon may be very smart, but that doesn't mean that that surgeon can relate constructively and effectively with the team. So they're smart in surgery, but not necessarily in these social settings. So I think emotional intelligence has done so much to pave the way for understanding the difference between IQ, intelligence, and what they call EQ, or however you want to describe emotional intelligence. And what we're simply saying, to your point, is that perceptions are the root causes of emotions. And you know, oftentimes too, a lot of times people think about they think about the idea of managing perceptions like a leader will think about managing other people's perceptions, like how are they seeing what are the optics of the situation, how are other people viewing it. But we really switch that around quickly and we say this is more about managing our own perceptions of ourselves, others, and the business that will lead to high performance outcomes, better teams, greater productivity, more diversity in terms of thought and problem solving, more humility, more truth, better responses to feedback, more emotional, what I would call emotional maturity. And so perceptual intelligence traces this relationship between perception, emotion, and behavior, identifies perception as a root cause, and then says, okay, if you can change perceptions of self and others and situations in 4 specific areas, we go into these, they lead to greater empowerment, greater humility, greater truth, more diverse problem solving, better responses to feedback, greater care for one another, managers caring authentically for people in the business, the worker manager respect goes up, the power, I call power differentials go down. And then also we applied finally to conflict resolution. So how do you resolve conflict without getting into factions and divisions that just destroy productivity? So it's about how these perceptions work and relates to emotional intelligence. And then it's applying it to making work better, and you know how this goes, Kathy. I think people can have a great experience and a fulfilling experience at work, and many often do, but people can also have a lousy experience at work. And we're talking about half people's waking lives in workplaces where 7 out of 10 people are thinking about a new job, would rather have a new job or rather have a different boss than more pay. And you know, engagement levels are typically at about a third. So disengaged, not motivated, struggling with a boss, or a boss struggling with people. And so we're really passionate about getting to these root causes so that we can help teams and people get better.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. And you so got me wanting to kind of poke a little.
Yes, good. Poke
So
away.
here's what I'm thinking. We're starting to talk the soft, touchy, feely stuff here, right? And if you think about the corporate space, it's about the job and the task and the results and do it and focus and da 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 da, which is back to the reason a lot of people don't want to be there in the first place and aren't performing at the level they can. Really curious about the impact in an organization when you have leaders that aren't into the touchy feely. And now we're saying, okay, wait a minute, here's some importance of the touchy feely. How does that affect them?
You know, we have a lesson that we teach about leading with love and power. And I think both are needed because you typically find the imbalance. So one would be leading with power and no love, or leading with love and no power. And there's actual studies that show that touchy-feely cultures are actually highly dysfunctional because you can't address issues, you can't correct problems and move things ahead. I mean, and as coaches, you deal with that. Like, how coachable is this person? How able are they to receive feedback and not get all worked into a knot over the anxiety or the anger? How do people respond in ways that are mature and not defensive? So to me, there's an oversensitivity problem just as much as an insensitivity problem. And this is a really interesting exploration because the people that are the experts in receiving feedback and giving feedback say that 95% of the problem is on the receiver's side, meaning the receiver expects feedback to be perfect, timed perfectly. It needs to be completely accurate. There can't be a shred of anything wrong. The motives have to be perfect. And think about it. Where in life am I ever going to get feedback like that? Nowhere. I'm going to get some guy who's not really that good at stuff telling me something and not in the wrong time, the wrong way. And they're saying basically that 95% of the burden is on the receiver's side to be emotionally strong enough to handle it and address issues that need to be addressed about insensitivity. But oversensitivity is 95% of the problem. Insensitivity is 5%. Now that's in their study, and there's cultures where there's a massive insensitivity problem. So we don't want to be insensitive to that. But we do also need to recognize the other side of the story, a larger side of the story, and that is, where do people have the emotional strength to be able to receive feedback, even if it's not that good, and go, okay, I can take this? Or the emotional strength to be resilient and resourceful when I'm in less than perfect conditions, which is called work. So I think it's a cool way. It's such an interesting question and balance between the insensitivity, oversensitivity, the harshness, basically we call it the power and love balance. And what we're saying is, it shouldn't be power without love or love without power. It should be both at their highest expression. And you and I, we all know that when we know people are pushing for us, like a great coach would coach a team, and we know that coach wants our team to win, there's something validating about it, even when we're being pushed hard. So how do you get that to work? Now that's not easy, but that's part of what we work to teach teams.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and Kevin, I know you're in organizations facilitating this training. I'm curious about an example, like a leader who's really, concrete, logic, task, that kind of thing. And then learning about perceptual intelligence and the tools that go along with it. And what's the difference? What's the impact in them?
Yeah, so I'll speak to this, and for those watching, one of my primary roles is to help facilitate the training amongst the group. And when we pull together teams within an organization, typically anywhere, from 4 to 8 people, and they go through and they study, and we come back and we discuss what they're learning week over week. And so one of the most recent examples I would say is situation where he's a partner, right? He's just basically the CEO of an organization, and they had somebody who was a high level with them. They are a consulting agency in and of themselves, and they were out cross country at a client doing work, and lo and behold, the gentleman was there actually structuring his own deal in order to transition his career away from him to the new company in which they were actually servicing. So part of this dynamic was that he was on a job, didn't really want to be there to begin with. He missed some family, I would say, opportunities and events in order to go and do this. And then, you know what? That person goes and does this to him, does it to the organization. So you can imagine kind of the position that this person's in, to have resentment, to have, just a dislike, and a kind of what most people ask themselves is, why did this happen? Why did it happen to me? And so from a personal angle, one of the things that we talked through on this, and what we're trying to deal with as far as managing perception, is that although that situation is now over, there's a little bit of bad blood, but can we get rid of the bad blood? And part of this, it was funny, he joked and he said, well, you can send me your therapy bill later. Even though that's not what I do, but it helped him in such a way, not only professionally, to help reassess the dynamic of that broken relationship, and can it be restored, because we brought it all the way around. Although he missed a family event, what were the implications that actually led to a closer relationship with his family, that came out of something that was maybe not good, but now we can reframe so that in the future, whether the person's name comes up, whether the memory and the story that he tells isn't a story of dissatisfaction and, where you're going to condemn someone, so to speak, but now it's a new story, because without that experience, his relationship with the family could maybe not have been as good as it is now. So there's this interesting ebb and flow that's always the dynamic between work and life that people experience. And we're dealing with work culture, but it's inevitable that we take this into our personal lives, where we see real true impact and change that actually isn't just temporary, but it's an enduring change, because as he's been able to shift his perspective of the situation and the person, and even himself in that, well, now, of course, he can be free. He can let the other person be free from that engagement, and actually have a very constructive view over all things. So I hope that that's a really good way to kind of lay out things that happen all the time. And that's just one example.
Building on that perceptually intelligent culture concept, and I guess this is to Kevin, but all of us really, one of the misperceptions in coaching is that there isn't a strong definition. To cut to the chase, how is the coaching function described in these organizations? Obviously, we're not therapists, we're not counselors, we're not guidance. How is it defined? How do people perceive coaching in this kind of culture?
And if I could respond to that, I had occasion to play golf with a man during the summer who was enjoying a coaching relationship, and he and his 4 partners of this billion-dollar company. And I asked him that question. I said, well, John, why do you employ a coach? And what benefit do you receive from that? And here's what he said. I find that the coach is a truth teller. They're telling me the truth, and I don't get that from my partners. And so I think that one of the roles for the coach, especially in perceptual intelligence, is being a bearer of truth. Sometimes that truth is hurtful and needs to require some change, and sometimes it's affirming. And so that definitely is a role for coaches within the environment of using perceptual intelligence. And I'll give you one further example of this recently. One of the men that I know very well, who's a CEO of a company, I had to deliver to him some bad news after receiving his 9 direct reports. They're cumulative results of his performance for the year. And I shared this with him, and one of the big oversights on his part was not being perceptually attuned to the fact that when he'd have a one-on-one meeting, either face-to-face or virtually like this, he was distracted so much that they weren't sure they were being listened to. They said, "We hear you, but I'm not sure you're listening to what we're saying." And that's where being perceptually trained through perceptual intelligence can make a real difference, not necessarily for the team, but for the CEO in this case.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So knowing Pan, she and I, when you say, okay, the coach is the truth teller, one of the things we know as coaches is we don't tell. Our job actually is very, very much not telling. Then what I'm thinking, Pan, is part of our job is also the observation. So when a client is saying something and describing an experience or whatever it is, part of what a coach is doing is noticing what's going on. Is there a theme or a trend? What isn't being said? What's a different possibility in terms of that perception, etc.? And to me, that's where the truth piece comes out. It can be challenging to have a coach who's asking you questions. You have to find your own answers. That's your job. And those questions really push you.
Well, just a follow up on that for just a second, Kathy. In this case, these were direct reports of the CEO, and
Yeah.
so the truth was this is what they were reporting. So I was simply sharing the truth with this CEO, and I do think that that is the role of a coach. And also, a coach needs to be perceptually trained, him or herself, to be able to deliver that news.
You know, I was going to jump in here. One of the things that I love about what we do and how it connects with coaches is that we can enhance coachability, meaning that we can encourage people or we can train the participants to want to listen. So it would be like this example of the CEO getting these 9 points of feedback and hearing the problem, which is a behavioral problem and a motivational problem. So again, we talk about how perception automatically influences emotions and motivations than behavior. So there's stages here. And I always kind of think about these situations and go, what stage are we in and what is causing what? Because it's easy to not have the ability to sort it out. Well, the behavior is looking at your phone instead of, making eye contact with someone. The behavior would be maybe when it's just failing to listen, letting distraction rule them. The motivation and the emotion is, why do they want to let distraction rule them? Why are they willing to even bring the phone into the conversation? And I kind of get a little ticked off when I think about this, which, by the way, there is constructive anger, very small sliver of constructive anger. It just tells it's the kind of I'm mad as hell. I'm going to do something about it. There's something good about it. 99% probably not constructive, but there's some constructive places. But there's something in me that would be going, why in the world is this guy having the motivation problem to even be distracted and not listen to them in the first place? It's because he doesn't see himself and others in the right way. And so the emotions and the motivations of, I would call it neglect, disregard, no care about what other people are saying, that's a problem. And that's an emotional motivational problem, but it's being driven by a perceptual problem. And if I can fix the perceptual problem, I don't have to tell them that they've got to put their phone away. I don't have to tell them that they have to make more time for people. They want to. And that's a huge difference. And I don't know if in the coaching world you run into that challenge of how do you get people to want to lean in more. But what we found is that our stuff, specifically what we call there our first two prime perceptions that are related to empowerment, humility, and truth. These things create coachability. So much that leaders have said, we want people to be trained in just these two as a prelim as part of their onboarding so that they're ready to make the chicken or do the manufacturing or go through the onboarding process in a receptive mode. So just another take on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that even in relation to, we're talking about kind of CEOs, right, and the executive level, the beauty of what we do in the confines of a culture is that we can actually transcend, I call it, all levels of the organization. And so think about it this way, because most, I would say, training just kind of sits up in that upper echelon, the C-suite. And so they get trained and they start to make decisions based upon their training, but actually nobody within the organization necessarily understands, or maybe not be poor communication, right? So they're just receiving new direction and change that takes place that personally affects them because they're part of the organization. But what we end up doing when we can train people not what to think, but how to manage their perceptions, is that when new things happen within an organization, rather than, Joe and Sally worker over here, where a decision comes down and it affects them, we've actually been able to train them so that they can manage their perception better than before, to where they're not building resentment potentially for their manager or for the CEO, where they're not escalating potential conflict with another coworker and bringing it to the manager because they have a problem with somebody. So you see a lot more, to Eric's point when he started out, productivity rise because people are able to manage themselves and the responsibility much better because they've all been trained on how to manage perception, not just the upper level. So it's a really unique, powerful combination when we go into those lower levels of how we really support the overall health of a culture. And obviously people make up that. So when we can reach individuals, we can reach teams, we can reach organizations and really make big impact.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm curious, when the organization is global and they've literally got people all over the world, how does this play out there?
I think the beauty of our structure is that it's founded on a digital course and then surrounded by and implemented by, I would say, a variety of service providers, from consultants to executive coaches to facilitators, and then internal teams. We love working with really robust internal teams because they can help navigate this through. And we're just asked to translate our curriculum into Arabic, for example. So, you get a multinational corporation and you need 6 translations. And we have the ability to do that. We're certainly not doing a major amount of that right now, but based on, those needs, some of those translations can happen. What we find too is a lot of those organizations, English is the language of trade. And so there's a lot of English speaking, but we definitely can adapt as well. But I think the great thing about our structure is that we're not requiring people to come in to a live experience. What we're doing instead is we're asking them to study a digital course, to discuss amongst themselves in a variety of groups. And Kathy, I love how you described, you had an expert on who was talking about the difference between team coaching and group coaching, right? So team coaching would be an intact team. Group coaching might be a bunch of vice presidents, from across the country that aren't necessarily in a team, but they're in a group, similar needs or not similar needs and positions. So we can do group coaching, team coaching, and it's basically what we call an empowerment group structure. Again, self-study in the digital course, and then weekly discussion, coaching sessions weekly as well. And we walk through a 2.5 month process that does this without interfering into schedules, without requiring people to be face to face. And so I think we've got this agility and flexibility in the way we structure, so this can go everywhere all at once. And I think that's important for changing culture, because the culture is the accumulation of all the elements. And if you only change one or two, that's not going to change the whole.
And Kathy, I might also add that we also refer sometimes to our sessions as bite-sized meals. So the self-study allows the individuals to do self-study, and then they come together in these group impact groups. Well, the coach can be intricately involved in that as well. And they are looking at and observing all the dynamics that are going on in these groups. And from that, develop additional coaching assignments, which is the beauty for the coaching world, because it's difficult sometimes to find business. But once you see there's evidence for a need there, then you can go to that individual after the group session is over and offer to help them with various details.
Mhm.
Okay. So I remember going through, like, as you said, Eric, those individual learning lessons, because I had the opportunity to do that with the LMS. Really enjoyed that process. So that was awesome. That was amazing. When I'm having a conversation with an organization, what's important to that organization in terms of whether or not they want to bring perceptual intelligence in?
Well, we obviously have a value proposition that's pretty multidimensional. We can solve a lot of different problems. And I think the overarching general value proposition is, when you fix a root cause, you make fast and extensive changes. It's like one root is connected to 10 branches and 1,000 leads, right? So if we can help an organization fix root causes, we get accelerated, extended results. So that would be a general value proposition. But every organization has its own specific needs, and might even have, like, right there in the granular group level or team level needs. For example, we were working with a trucking company that is saying, okay, we've got vice president of sales that have come from the sales team within our various departments, and there's a big problem with them being respected now that they're in these higher roles. So there's a lot of a disconnect between the sales managers of the various sites and these three new reorg VP of sales folks. So what we'd like to do is get the executive team, all these VP of sales in, and then bring in as many of these site level service or sales managers as possible, so that this group can create more coherence or cohesion. So there could be specific culture issues. There could be specific structural issues. There could be issues that are granular down to the team level. And then there's these global issues. Another organization is telling us they have a trust problem with their organization. Well, we tell them that we know the root causes of trust. And if you can get us in there to help teach these things, then I think, and obviously people have to do them, because you can talk about trust, but if you don't act in a trustworthy way, forget it. So we definitely can adapt to those needs. But what we find here, this is another thing that I think is really important for the way we're positioned in the market of leadership development and coaching, is that we're very compatible. We're not going into an organization saying, turn a different direction with us. We're saying, let us support your direction, your values, your culture work with greater acceleration and breadth. Because when we can help you, let's say like that CEO that Rich was talking about that had the listening challenge. Well, you could tell him to listen more, but that's not really going to work. But we all know what we want is him to listen more. But if we could flip that switch down at the root cause of him not wanting to get rid of this distraction and not wanting to listen. Listening happens not only there when we're being told, but everywhere. So what we feel like we can do is we can come alongside and support and extend and accelerate the things that organizations are already doing. And that's a big value proposition. So lots of value, I think, that we can bring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's so tailored to what the organizational objectives are and challenges are. So that's awesome. And of course, Pan and I are, one of the big areas we're interested in is adding to on that coaching side of it. So that's that's super exciting. Recognizing our time, what I want to throw out to everyone that's here and listening, couple of opportunities here. If this is something that's going to fit in your organization or be an opportunity in your organization in terms of achieving certain metrics or objectives, reach out to us, let us know. And coaches, similarly, if this is something that's of interest and fascinating, maybe you want to start with learning some of the basics like I got to do. That was fun. And then decide if you want to learn more, et cetera, and or be available in terms of coaching or even facilitating this space. Reach out, same thing. We're all here, we're all available. And this is a really powerful tool. So thank you for being here and sharing with us. Closing thoughts, everyone.
Kathy, thank you for inviting us. The last point that I would make is that to comply with what Eric was saying, our training is designed not to be a flavor of the month approach. We
That's
want to be an amoeba to inject into an organization parallel to what they're already doing and help support that throughout the organization. And we look forward to helping coaches who listen to this particular program investigate us, and we'll be wide open to share with them all about perceptual intelligence.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say this, not to create a false summit of us closing our time here, but Kathy, I just want to maybe ask this directly to you, because when we first met, I took you through the lessons personally, right? I was kind of the one-on-one facilitator. So I'm just curious if you can share, because we've been invited on, there's obviously value that you see in what we do. Can you speak to what spoke to you and what you saw and what drew you or attracted you to perceptual intelligence to begin with, that helps just kind of branch out and expand what we're doing today? Where did it all come from, and how did it get here for you?
Yeah, no, excellent question. I'm a very pragmatic person. I want to see what works. I want to see the reason it works. I want to understand it. And as much as I have my very touchy-feely side, I also have my very logic side of it. And to me, this really spoke to both of that. Maybe gives you a hint of the reason I was asking, what about that leader? That's, logic kind of thing. Because I've got that side of me going on too. And I think when you go through the information, it's logical, it makes sense. You can actually analyze it, you can see how it works and how it makes a difference. And then, of course, on the touchy-feely side, going so much further than we do with emotional intelligence, going beyond that and managing, as Eric was talking about, the perception behind the emotion. That's going to have, to me, an appeal on the emotion side. And then when you marry those and put those together and create the tool that this has become, both in terms of the education process and then in the conversations that follow from that, that's amazing and powerful. And I think from the practical side of it, we know that a lot of programs go into companies, the training, the flavor of the month that you're saying, those are there all day long, right? And then they're gone. And statistically, you do a training program like that, and 87% of any change you brought about is lost because there isn't the follow-up coaching. And you all are aware of that. You've built that in. Hey, we're not just going to do the training. There's coaching involved in this too, because that's where you get that long-term meaningful, level of awareness, change, application, et cetera. So that was probably way too long of an answer, though.
No, that was amazing. Kathy, I got to just say that, I've dedicated my life to this. We have 4 books and courses and trainings in the Perceptual Intelligence series. I've got, 11,000 plus hours of writing since September of 2005. So I feel like a guy that's been in a hole with a small shovel for almost 20 years. And I do enjoy the process, but I just love to hear that, you know, the fact that people have gotten value out of the time I've spent down in the cave, so to speak, or down in the hole, digging, finding things that I thought were just gold, were so helpful. And to hear you say back that that's helping you just means the world to me. I'm so, it brings me such a happiness that I can't even fully describe to you. You know, I remember an author once told me that that writing a book, and you've done this kind of stuff, so you know, it's like a 5-year game of Marco Polo. So you say Marco, and you hear Polo maybe 5 years later, maybe 10, because there's such a distance between the time where you got this information and got it on the paper, and then they got the information. And so when I hear the polo come back, and it's a good thing, it's so fulfilling. So thank you for what you said. You could have talked double, triple the time as far as I was concerned on that. It was very good. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Pam, I got to hold space for you.
I just am loving Kathy and I and all coaches, trainers, and facilitators seek the positive language and hearing things like trust and hearing things like forward movement versus conflict. But moving forward is really not even wonderful, but absolutely necessary in the work that we do. So lovely. I want to know more.
Oh, there you go. Guessing a lot of people will, so we'll look forward to hearing from them. Want to invite all of you come visit us. We've got www.coachcert.com and www.coach-123.com. And of course, we're really excited to get you connected with Rich and Kevin and Eric as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
And